So welcome, first of all, and I invite you to take your position if you haven't already, and immediately become aware of the feeling of sitting. How do you exactly know that you're sitting? How do you know you're not standing or lying? And letting the physical senses, the senses of the body, especially the sense of hearing, the sense of seeing, the sense of feeling, just ground us here in mindfulness, in awareness of the present moment. So noticing what arises in your sense of hearing. At your ear. Noticing what arises in your sense of seeing. Whether the eyes are open or closed. Without getting drawn in by anything. So we're not following the senses, but we're just letting the senses pick up the information continually. And you can close down the eyes also and notice the visual sense still is active. And of course, the feeling of the body, the contact with different surfaces. Relaxing in your posture. No need to tense or hold it, just allow yourself to sit back and relax. For now, not needing to do anything, just receiving everything as it is. And you might already notice that there are some thoughts present, whatever stories are going on right now, whether they are related to future or past or even present. Sometimes the thoughts are more auditory, so kind of hearing your own voice speaking in your head. Sometimes the thoughts are more visual. Maybe you're seeing kind of imagination or different images flickering, imagining past, future, present. And sometimes the thoughts are a bit more somatic, so it's more like feelings, physical feelings, emotional feelings. And the realm of the mind can also have a certain tint almost like a overlay of positive or negative or neutral. Maybe noticing if right now there is a kind of feeling of having a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral experience. It doesn't matter which one, just noticing. There is no right one. Whatever you're experiencing in the present moment is the right one. Things don't have to be different. We don't need to change anything. We don't need to maintain anything. Still feeling the entire body and any other senses. You can even gently just go through the body, kind of like head, arms, torso, pelvis, legs. No need to make a strict scan, but just kind of checking in with different body parts. Or just letting your attention jump around the body. The feeling of the body is our anchor. Just like the breath was our anchor in the first 4 days, now for the last 5 days, the sensation of the body, sensations of the body is our anchor. And every time we drift off, we can just notice this and gently come back to the anchor. And also we just check in whether there's any of the 5 hindrances present. So noticing if there's any liking or disliking in the mind. Any sense of greed or hatred. Checking in if there's any restlessness, anxiety, worry. Or maybe sleepiness, drowsiness, laziness. And lastly, checking if there's any doubt. Doubt about yourself, doubt about technique, doubt about the teacher. Just checking in. Noticing. Okay, so you can come back to opening your eyes. And giving me your attention. So today we'll talk a little bit more about the Vipassana technique and what Vipassana actually means, as well as how to practice the Vipassana and how it's supposed to help us. Well, I just switched on the closed captions and they're very distracting. Let's see how it goes. So first, a question for you. Have you noticed any changes in terms of how you relate to your experience since the last 5 days of meditating? So maybe during the day or during the meditation itself, have you maybe just 2 or 3 words for something that you've noticed? And if you haven't noticed anything at all, that's completely fine as well. More in-moment awareness, calmer, less judgment, more present, feeling a little bit more aware. Anyone else want to share? Organized. Okay, maybe there's a bit more organization, a bit more ability to manage things, which otherwise become a bit messy. Great. Okay. Focused. So maybe you are starting to understand a little bit more. You're starting to see a little bit more about your body and your mind and how it works, how your attention is working, how your thoughts work, how they come in, how they distract you, and starting to change a little bit the habit pattern to always get caught in that thinking, to get caught in future, past, etc. To be a little bit more present, focused, not feeding those judgmental thoughts. Maybe a sense of calmness starts to arise. Great. So Vipassana meditation, we start to go a little bit deeper into this wisdom or into this understanding the body and mind system. So the first and most important lesson in Vipassana meditation is to be able to distinguish between what is mind and what is body. Not distinguishing about it intellectually, but distinguishing from your own experience. So if you can start to notice what is a thought, and a thought is not focusing on my breath and the sensations, you're already starting to distinguish what is my mind, what is my body. So here I have a little bit of an overview of how we can look at the difference between these two components of our experience. So the first one is the body. The body foundation of mindfulness is kind of the foundation of mindfulness, which is the easiest to be aware of. You know, it's what we see, it's what we hear, it's what we feel and sense with our body, and it's also the sense of what our body is doing at the moment. So whether we're walking, sitting, lying, running, and the sense of kind of where my body is relative to each other. So if I'm, you know, looking around, if my hand is up or down, this is kind of the body, awareness of the body. And the second thing is awareness of the mind. So here's where it becomes a little bit more tricky, because observing the mind is a little bit more subtle. But we've got different thoughts. So thoughts, as I mentioned in the guided meditation, once you can really start to observe thoughts, you'll notice there's usually a see, a hear, and a feel component to those thoughts. It takes some level of concentration and mindfulness to be able to kind of distinguish that, and we all have different tendencies, but that's a nice one to investigate. You've also got the feeling tone of the experience. So whether you all know what it feels like to have an unpleasant experience, you all know what it feels like to have a pleasant experience, and what it feels like to have a more neutral experience. So this kind of feeling tone of our experience is an overlay by the mind of whether it likes or doesn't like what we're doing. Then we also have our different ideas, our expectations, our concepts, which are made out of thoughts. And the mind foundation is also kind of the state of mind that we're in, whether it's a very distracted mind, whether it's a very calm mind, whether it's a very concentrated mind, whether it's a very critical mind, all the kind of, or foggy or sleepy mind. So these kinds of mind states are also what can be observed. So why is this important to understand? Is just like when we try to make good decisions about our health for our body, for example, we all know what's kind of good for our body and what's kind of less good for our body. So for myself, I know if I do an hour of exercise every morning, my body feels better. If I eat nice vegetables and don't eat so much sugar, my body also feels better. So I kind of have some awareness of what impacts my body, what makes my body suffer, feel more pain, and what makes my body feel a bit better. And then there's the whole kind of area of the mind. And the mind is usually a little bit more complex and a little bit more difficult to see what exactly makes the mind suffer and what makes the mind happy. And of course, we all know, going for a walk or something is nice for us, but still we often run in these traps of what we expect, what we think about, how we judge, how we let hatred arise in the mind, how we let anger arise, how we let annoyance arise, how we feel sorry for ourselves, these kinds of lonely, etc., all these kind of more unpleasant things. We typically have a bit less clarity about how they arise, the conditions which give rise to them, and what makes these things end. So in Vipassana meditation, we are doing mindfulness. We are practicing an awareness of both the body and mind to help us build this understanding. In Western mindfulness, what you probably know as mindfulness, it typically just refers to the body component of mindfulness, but the original Vipassana kind of incorporates all of experience. We can be mindful of everything that's arising in experience, not just what is my body or sensation or how I'm eating. And we will get into that. So to give an example here of thoughts, I'm going to play a little game. It's called the Apple game from my meditation teacher. So notice what arises in the mind when I say the word apple. Apple, apple, apple. So what kind of apple do you see? Maybe you can quickly write that in the chat. When I say apple, what do you see in front of you? Or what kind of apple are you imagining? A red apple. The Apple company logo. Red apple. Green apple. Red, crisp, juicy fruit. Also red. Great. So as you see, there's a strong apple with some leaves attached. Great. So there's a strong interconnection between mind and body. So everything that arises in your sense of hearing. So apple, what I'm saying right now, apple is arriving to your ear, and it's like some sound frequency, which is then being processed by your mind. And you see some image. You see a red apple, you see a green apple, you see the apple with leaves, you see the Apple logo. So it creates some thought in you with some visual imagery. Maybe if you have mindfulness, you can pick up that you see that image. Maybe you just know it's a red apple or a green apple. But there's a strong interrelation there. And someone even said, crisp, juicy fruit. So even there was some sense of taste or sensation maybe that you could feel in your mouth as a result of just these sound waves hitting your ear. So there's a very strong sense of cause and effect happening every single moment every single moment of mind, we are constantly, there's one thing is linking into the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And typically we don't see this process happening. It's happening all so fast, so quick. And yeah, we are in mindfulness, we're going to try to slow this process down a bit, firstly by simplifying the input. So just by doing sitting meditation and by consciously bringing our attention and focus towards this process, so that we start to see how all this works. Great. So in this technique of Vipassana meditation, where we're doing body scanning, we are focusing on this aspect of the mind-body system, which is the feelings, what you can sense physically, how you're sitting, how your body feels, as well as in the mind, what you feel about that, whether it's unpleasant, pleasant, and what kind of emotions come up relative to that, which you will also feel inside your body. So another question for you. Have you noticed any relationship between your breath or how your body feels, as well as any kind of mind state, mood state that you feel or that you notice that you're in? So maybe just name the mood and what it feels like in the body. So it might be something like anxiety, and then, oh, I feel this effect on my breath, or I feel this feeling in my body, or restlessness and I feel this in my body, or sadness and I feel this. Great. So there is anxious thoughts, so a state of anxiety is increasing the frequency of his breath. There's sweaty and shakiness when the anxiety, when there's calm present, the breath slows down. And what else is there? And if you haven't noticed anything, don't worry. So interestingly here also one which is the other way around. So instead of the emotion affecting the body, someone's saying here, Maurizio saying, pain and tension in the body makes the mind feel restless. Great. Wendy is saying when she feels anxiety, her legs get restless and the body tightens. Adrian, when he is acting faster and rushing things, when he is restless and there's not so much mindfulness or stillness in the mind. Great. So already starting to notice some of this interdependency between mind and body. And as I was mentioning before, with these kind of little mind moments, we're constantly influencing the mind and body systems, constantly influencing each other and bouncing in between. And as some of you noticed already, all our emotions, thoughts, reactions, our state of mind can directly be felt inside the body. So there's a very embodied sensation associated with all emotions. And you might be able to already notice this with stronger emotions, but actually this happens with even smaller thoughts. Something as simple as, oh, I don't like that there's still 10 minutes left on the timer, and you will feel some sensation, but maybe you haven't developed the subtlety or the concentration yet to pick that sensation up. So what is the point of all what I'm saying? Brings us to the technique of Vipassana meditation. So far you've been practicing concentration meditation, where we are focusing on our breath, and every time something happens, we are kind of bringing ourselves back which already starts to build some awareness of thought, etc. But in Vipassana, we're going to extend this towards the whole mind-body system, or everything that we're experiencing, which can be seen in the mind and body. And we're focusing on the felt or the somatic component of this. So Vipassana means to see clearly. The prefix V means clear or special, and passana means to see. So it means clear seeing. And what are we seeing clearly? In the whole mind-body system. Basically, the big discovery of the Buddha was that we need to investigate our experience and disentangle our experience with great clarity in order to prevent ourselves to suffer or to stop our suffering. Because there were many techniques around the time of the Buddha which were more concentration based. So when something triggers you, you bring your attention to your breath at the nose, and you kind of allow yourself to be less triggered because you're not focusing on the thing that's triggering you. But what the Buddha's great insight was to go really to the root cause of why something makes us suffer or makes us unhappy. And we have to feel that thing itself and develop an equanimity and train our sense of awareness and equanimity towards that thing. So say something triggers you, maybe someone says something you don't like, or someone says something about you that you don't like. Hey, Reimer, you're a shit meditation teacher. Wow, this sound goes into my brain and it creates some unpleasant feeling in my body. And that in turn, it creates some thoughts in my mind, some unpleasant thoughts, and keeps bouncing around inside my head. And I keep thinking about that person, or I'm thinking about myself and how, oh, that's not true, or that is true, or whatever. And then I start to suffer. I start to have very unpleasant feeling. I don't like this. So what the point of this technique is as soon as that hearing comes in and creates some unpleasant feeling of tightening or contraction, if I pay attention to that feeling immediately as it's happening, it dissipates. It basically arises, and I kind of cut this interconnected chain of cause and effect, and I just let that moment be that moment, and that feeling passes away again, and then I am back in being more in a kind of open baseline state. Yeah, so this was the kind of, and as I mentioned before, mindfulness is kind of the word that we use to the Western word that is referred to this way of paying attention to reality. So to be mindful is to be aware of how things are arising, how sound is arising, how some thoughts are arising, how some feelings in the body, how disliking is arising, and to be mindful of that is to kind of stop that process from creating suffering for myself. So usually when we start to suffer, so all of you know what it's like to have a more unpleasant moment, whether that's related to other people, whether it's related to your own thinking, depressive thinking, whether it's related to self-judgment, whether it's related to when you fall into hatred or anger, whatever it is. We all have our sources of suffering. It can be also guilt. And one that trips me up also is, when I eat too much and I feel guilty after that or something like this. But typically when this kind of suffering happens, it's so overwhelming that I have no clarity about what's going on in mind and body. So this kind of image depicts that a little bit. It's kind of like a mess of different thoughts, emotions, sensations, and the whole of experience is kind of colored by this experience. So when we start to apply a bit more mindfulness to experience, we start to disentangle some of these different things that are happening. And maybe we start to see, actually, this big problem or this big suffering is actually just coming, there's a little bit here, there's a little bit here, and there's a little bit here. So actually this previous image is just these three scribbles copy pasted over and over. So that might be the thing that you see. You see, I see this behavioral pattern, this behavioral pattern, and this behavioral pattern, instead of this complete mess of overwhelm. We all know it's like when we have a bad day or something and we have a lot to do and things just kind of pile up and everything is overwhelming and it's really hard to deal with. So we can start to disentangle some of these things with mindfulness and see them more clearly. And eventually, maybe even seeing that really there is no problem at all in any moment. And my problem is just how I perceive or my expectations to how I should feel, etc. But that is a very, in my opinion, that's a very, very deep state that can't really be maintained, for myself also. Maybe one day. So when we practice Vipassana, we need more experience. So yesterday I was kind of mentioning these three levels of wisdom to you. The wisdom that is heard, what you're hearing now from me sounds great. The wisdom that you think about, so you, after the lecture, you reflect on what I'm saying. Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. I see why this is logical, blah, blah, blah. And then there's the third and most important aspect of wisdom, which is experiential wisdom. So actually taking these ideas and looking in your own experience and seeing this process happening over and over again. And through this gathering of experience, we start to develop wisdom. Our mind starts to learn and our mind starts to make better decisions automatically because it has more accurate data and better information available to it, which is why we need to practice. So what is the point? To reduce our suffering. Suffering is a translation of the Buddhist term dukkha. Suffering, some of you might think that's an overly negative word. It can also be translated as dissatisfaction, displeasure, why we are not continually satisfied with our experience. So when the pain happens, this can be physical pain, this can be emotional pain, mental pain. Our typical way of dealing with that is through resistance, through so if we have zero experience, we usually directly ascribe that pain to the object on the outside. So with the example of someone saying that I'm a shit teacher, I immediately ascribe this pain that I feel to this person. Oh, that person sucks and I hate him. If I start to develop a bit more awareness, I can see, this pain is actually something that's happening inside me and it's nothing related to that person. This pain is inside. But I have a lot of resistance and I push it away and I don't want to have this. And this is kind of like shooting the second arrow and I cause myself a lot more discomfort. So often when we have some pain, it's kind of like we or pain or tension, we have one shoulder up, this is the original pain, and then our resistance to that pain is kind of tensing up the other shoulder. And often when we notice just that we're resisting it and relax that, often that first pain also relaxes. So Vipassana meditation. The two components of the Vipassana technique are to build a deeper awareness and to build a deeper equanimity. So the awareness is kind of like our little microscope that we have. You've already been training your awareness by training your attention. And you are also going to train your awareness by continuing doing the body scanning, the awareness of your body. And with that, we start to have a better microscope. We start to have a better magnifying glass. Or another way to think about it is like you have a camera, and previously your camera was, you know, maybe 1 frame per second and resolution of, you know, these really bad YouTube videos, which are like 144 pixels or something like this. That's maybe how previously your awareness is. And through training, you start to upgrade that. You start to go to 10 frames per second and to maybe 720 pixels. And eventually you build more and more clarity and more able to see. So maybe then you have 60 frames per second and you can see in 4K or something. And when you can see that clearly, each moment becomes so slow, and you can see this whole process of, when I say apple, you see, you notice hearing, you notice that image popping up, you notice the sensation of the juiciness, you notice the thought that's arising in response to that. You can also notice everything that's happening. And the other important aspect of the Vipassana technique is equanimity. So when we have equanimity, which basically means, it comes from the Latin word, it means like inner balance or balance, which can also be kind of neutrality or non-judgment or non-involvement. This basically creates a way for us to collect unbiased data. So when a scientist is making an experiment, it's important that the scientist isn't biased towards any one result, because otherwise the data he's collecting isn't accurate. So it's the same when we practice Vipassana. We need to be uninvolved. We can't be preferring, I like having this experience, I dislike having this experience, and start to kind of manipulate or push and pull experience, which is also why you've been practicing not to influence the breathing. We're not trying to influence the breathing and in that way develop higher concentration. We're just trying to feel the breathing as it is, no matter if it's fast, slow, if we like it, if we dislike it. And it's the same when you're doing the body scanning. So if you like what you're feeling, if you don't like what you're feeling, if you hate that you're feeling nothing, if you love that you're feeling so much vibrations, whatever, you have to maintain complete equanimity in order to keep collecting accurate experience. And when you're in the state of just being aware and not pushing away, not expecting anything, and not trying to make anything happen, this is the right mindfulness. And the right mindfulness, every moment of right mindfulness is a moment of freedom. Yeah. So we're trying to see the truth over and over again. It doesn't matter if you start to feel anxious or depressed or whatever, don't worry, you're not doing it wrong. It's completely normal to, keep getting it wrong, to keep falling, but each time you fall, you learn how not to do that again. So we could keep collecting through trial and error, almost keep collecting these experiences about how not to have expectations, how not to have judgments about our experience, etc. Because each time we do it, we see our suffering, and the mind automatically learns not to repeat that pattern over and over. Yeah, maybe just one more word about equanimity. Equanimity is basically the ease with experience, or the acceptance or surrender to the experience, however it is, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And it's also important to say that equanimity isn't some feeling of pleasure or peace or bliss or something, although that can be a byproduct. But equanimity is more the feeling that after that bliss has passed, how do you feel? Do you feel dejected or depressed that the pleasant feeling is gone, or do you feel completely open and okay with it? That would be equanimity. Equanimity helps awareness, and awareness helps equanimity. The more neutral you are, the more you can see. The more you can see, the clearer you can see, the more neutral you will be, because you see the truth. Okay. So the last thing, the GIF isn't working. That was supposed to be a GIF. Okay, I'll stop that. One phrase that you can keep in mind when you are meditating is experience is basically a constant flow of impersonal changing phenomena. Just like a river is never the same, and if we look at a part of the river, just like this picture here, the river is never the same in any single moment. The river is constantly changing, and it's an impersonal thing. It's not related to who you are or your being. And it's actually the same thing with all of experience. All of experience is constantly changing. Even things that look stable in terms of the outside reality are constantly changing in terms of in terms of our direct experience of them. So even you might look at something stable now, but if we really develop a very high resolution camera or awareness, we can see that constantly the visual phenomena is arising and passing away, arising and passing away. And it's the same thing with our thoughts. It's the same thing with our sensations, our emotions. When we feel upset, when we feel anger or something, you might say, I am angry. You personalize and you kind of solidify and make that into a permanent thing. But actually, anger is a continuously changing process of different feelings, sensations, thoughts, continuously coming up. And the more you kind of believe in that story of the anger, or the more you say, I am angry, instead of just anger is arising, the more you actually feed that process, and the more it continues to bounce up and down between mind and body, continuously rolling that. So try to see experience when you're meditating a little bit more, take it less personally, it's impersonal, and notice the constant change, notice the impermanence moment to moment. Your knee, the feeling of your knee and the pain of your knee only seems solidified and like pain if you don't look at it very closely. If you look at it very closely, you'll notice actually this pain is made up of some heat, some pressure, some tingling, some vibrations, and that is changing moment to moment, moment to moment. And that applies to every aspect of your experience. Yeah. Okay. That was the last point. So I invite you to close down the eyes, and we're going to do a quick review. So come back to the feeling of your body after all that cognition. Feeling of sitting, touching the seat. Where your hands are resting on your body. So today we learned about how the point of Vipassana is to understand body and mind. Body and mind is all of experience. We learned about seeing, hearing, feeling, and how that can arise both in the body and in the mind. We played this little apple game, which showed us that mind and body are constantly interacting and causing each other, cause and effect, cause and effect. The body is basically what we can sense with our five senses, and the mind is all the rest, our thoughts, our intentions, and the mind kind of packages information and creates action, intentions. Each phenomena of the mind causes some sensation on the body. Each phenomena of the body can cause the mind to change. For example, restlessness in the body causing restlessness in the mind. so far you've been practicing more concentration style practice, where we bring our attention back to something. Now we are going to practice more Vipassana, which means to investigate, to dissect and divide, to disentangle our experience, to see clearly. And to deal with our experience, especially experience of suffering, by breaking them up, by dividing them, and to see into their true nature. But in order to do this, we need to practice. We need to gather experience. We need to continuously be aware, be mindful, so that our mind learns, so that this doesn't just stay theories and ideas, but so it becomes an embodied, automatic habit. And the point is to reduce our suffering by stopping to resist our discomforts and allowing them to be. And in the Vipassana technique, we have two main pillars that make it work. And the first one being developing our awareness, greater clarity, greater frames per second, which is basically like having a good microscope or a good camera. And the second one is greater equanimity, a balanced mind, an unbiased mind, a non-judgmental mind, so that we collect accurate information, understanding. And a helpful thing to keep in mind is that experience is constant, impersonal, changing phenomena. The more we take things personal, and the more we believe in the idea that things are permanent rather than constantly changing, the more we suffer. So we try to depersonalize experience by not identifying so much anymore and by watching it continuously change. And now we open for any questions that any of you might have, and whether it's about anything that I just said or the technique. There are no stupid questions. Please go ahead and ask anything. Or even if you want me to expand a little bit on one concept, which I maybe mentioned but didn't elaborate on, you can feel free to write that in the chat or speak it. Is it important to keep eyes closed versus slightly open, looking slightly down during meditation? Both is fine. Importantly, when you keep them closed, to have them nice and relaxed, closed, not to shut them too tightly. Slightly open is also okay. I like to use that when I feel a little bit drowsy or sleepy. I'm just letting a little bit of light in, but it's nice that you say we keep them slightly down, looking more at the ground, because when we tend to look up more, we start to see more things that are interesting to us and can distract us. So even if the eyes are open, we are not trying to bring any attention to our vision, only at the beginning when we do the warm-up. Why is it recommended to eat plant-based food? Because of, in my experience, it's because of, well, the first reason is it helps our meditation, because meat tends to make us feel a bit more heavy, is more difficult to digest, so we use more energy. So the mind tends to be a little bit more gross and less clear. And yeah, the other thing is more an ethical consideration. So if you kind of bring more awareness to what you are eating and not eating meat, and noticing that actually it's not necessary to eat meat, and beings are being killed for this meal, and you might change that eating habit. Having said that, however, for example, in Thailand, all the monks eat meat every single day. So that's more of a, yeah, it depends a bit, but that's my personal opinion. How realistic is it to keep up the practice after the course? What are the pitfalls or any advice on keeping up the habit? Yeah, I have lots of advice or lots of ideas which have helped me. I will talk more about it on Saturday when we talk about integrating the practice into daily life. But for now, maybe I'll say that you need to be you need to be disciplined and diligent with it, and especially in the first few months, maybe doing half an hour a day, and then after a while it becomes such an easy habit, just like brushing your teeth, which you don't even think about anymore. You just do it. But in for those first few weeks, months, it takes discipline. Okay, maybe just a temperature check. 1 to 5. 1 is I didn't understand anything from the lecture. 5 is everything makes a lot of sense. Please write the number in the chat. 1. 5, 4, 5, 4, 4. Okay, the people who wrote 4, what is the concept that prevented you from putting 5? Or maybe something you disagree with? And meanwhile, is half an hour a day sufficient in your opinion? Half an hour a day is kind of, I think, the minimum required to see some change happening, rather than just settling the mind a little bit. Better 1 hour. Generally, the more time you do, the faster you'll see progress, but quality is more important than quantity. But I recommend half an hour minimum, because it's still manageable to kind of fit that in. Yeah, you can change your posture slowly and mindfully. So especially now, it becomes very important when you're doing the body scanning. When you do change your posture, try to do so very slowly. So, okay, my knee is really starting to hurt, and I'm going to maybe stretch it out. And so I'm aware, okay, I'm doing my body scan, then okay, I'm going to stretch out my knee. I move it slowly, and I'm aware. Now I can really be aware of each sensation as I do it. And that way your concentration will be interrupted. Maybe I stretch it out, interrupted less and less. Yeah, morning better than evening, because morning helps us kind of like clean the mind a little bit in preparation for the day. And we're more likely to be mindful throughout the day if we meditated that morning. The closed captions are very inaccurate. Okay, what else is there? Any other questions or concepts? For elaborating? How was the Vipassana meditation today? If you've already done the body scanning now, was it more difficult, the same, or easier than the concentration on the breath? Maybe you can write in the chat. Easier, almost impossible to finish. Bit harder to focus on each part. Easier. Difficult to do the body scan. Okay. Yeah, it seems like there's a whole range. Some people find the body scanning easier, some people find the concentration easier. Yeah, normal to feel. It's difficult to feel the sensation in some parts of the body. Some parts kind of seem very blind or dull or fuzzy. Just stay there for a while and then move on. Don't develop a craving for feeling sensations. Don't develop a aversion towards not feeling them. Maintain the balance of your mind. If one achieves equanimity and stop reactions, can they still keep their determination and stand up and fight for them? Are you joking? Also, equanimity is not really something you achieve. Equanimity is more a quality that comes and goes also. It's also impermanent. Mindfulness is also impermanent. Concentration is also impermanent. So you might, feel quite equanimous in one moment and it's going well. And then you feel restless and agitated in the next moment. And it's important to also have equanimity towards not feeling equanimity. And just because we're equanimous doesn't mean that we ignore everything or something. We can still see the thoughts, we can still think. It's just that we're a bit less, we suffer less. I can still think very well. Actually, I can think much clearer and better than before I started meditating. Much more productive because there's less kind of anxiety or push and pull when I work, etc. And so I feel it's a great thing. Okay. So yeah, we will conclude the session unless anyone has anything else. You're also welcome to stay back a bit. I'll be on for a few more seconds. Thank you. I'm not a bad teacher. Pleasant feelings in my body going on. And yeah, thank you so much. Enjoy. Good luck with the practice. Tomorrow again, we have drop-in Q&A if you want to ask anything. Otherwise, continue what you are doing. And you're also welcome to message me any questions on WhatsApp. Thank you.